my name is Nick Jaskolski. I am a Life Scout with Troop 142 out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm here with my father, Colonel Jaskolski, Brigade Commander of the 142nd Field Artillery Brigade. It is February 2nd, 2019. We're at the Armed Forces Reserve Center in Barling, Arkansas. I'm here with a scout from my troop, Chorde, who's helping me with the interviews, and this interview is for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview.
You bet, son. You bet.
So, to start off, where and when were you born?
So I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, actually on Kirkland Air Force Base on July 2nd, 1974. So it was where my dad was stationed when he was in the Air Force.
So what were your parents' names?
So my dad, your granddad, was Irvin Jaskolski, and my mom, your grandma, was Genevieve Jaskolski, and she goes by Jean. Of course, dad was Lieutenant Colonel, and mom was actually, your grandma was in the Marine Corps for a little bit.
Who are your siblings and what are their names?
So I've got two brothers, your uncles. Andrew, who's 2 years younger than me, and he was in the Army, retired as a major here a couple of years ago, and then my youngest brother, Joseph, was also in the Army, and he retired, I guess he separated from service, I bet you it's probably been 10 years now, maybe less than that, but yeah, right in there as a captain. He left service as a captain.
So what were you doing before you entered the service?
So I actually joined the service right out of high school. So I was in high school. I was 17 years old. I was your age when I started my military service. I graduated high school when I was 17 and was fortunate enough to get a appointment to West Point, and so I started active service immediately. Upon graduation, I think I had like 2 weeks before I had started at West Point. So, started in 1996, or no, 1992. Graduated in 96, but yeah, just graduated in 1992. So, and then of course 4 years at West Point, and then active service for 6, and then up until now here in the Guard.
So, you're in the Army. Why did you choose the Army in West Point over? Yeah,
that's a great question, because my dad, your grandpa, he was Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force. He was actually still on active duty in the Air Force when I left to go to West Point, and had looked at a couple of different options, and I was narrowing it down between two. So I was thinking either West Point, or I was also looking at potentially doing a Air Force ROTC scholarship at UC Santa Barbara, and was about set on going to UC Santa Barbara on that Air Force ROTC scholarship, because my dad, your grandpa, was very hands off about this decision. He was like, this is the first decision you have to make as a man. You need to make it yourself, and I was initially kind of taken back by that, because Grandpa had always been very helpful in making decisions. But this is something that he wanted me to make by myself, and so I was kind of toying between two services, either the Army, going to West Point, or the Air Force, going to UC Santa Barbara. And I liked UC Santa Barbara because I had an Air Force ROTC scholarship, and they also had surfing as a as a class there. So that was kind of interesting. But so I was pretty sure I was going to go to UC Santa Barbara. I was talking to your great uncle, Uncle Pete, who also was in the Air Force. Before that, was in the Army. But he called me up and said, "Hey, how are you thinking about colleges?" And I said, "Well, I'm down two choices." And I said, "What are they?" And I said, "Well, it's either going in the Army at West Point or going in the Air Force with ROTC scholarship, UC Santa Barbara." And he said, "It's a no-brainer, right?" And I said, "Yeah, you're right, UC Santa Barbara." And he said, No, that's not what I've been thinking, Nick. I think you probably need to reconsider it." But so I did. So I went and looked at a number of different schools, and one of the things that really impressed me about West Point different than the Air Force Academy and different than the Navy was that, West Point, all the statues there are of leaders. They're of men who led soldiers in combat. It's Eisenhower, and it's Patton, and it's Grant, and Thaddeus Kuczewski, who was a great Polish-American patriot during the Revolutionary War, has got a statue there. But and that's different than either the Navy and different than the Air Force, where a lot of what you see on those campuses is more, it's airplanes and it's missiles and it's ships and things like that. And what really struck me was the focus on leadership, and technology plays a big part of it, as it does in the other services as well. But really, the thing that it came down to was the focus on leadership, and the fact that this particular institution, West Point, the Army, really places that above everything.
And when you went to West Point, what was it like departing, leaving home and going there?
Yeah, so I was kind of cocky when I was 17 years old. I was, pretty certain that I was going to be able to handle anything. It was. Now, I flew out to West Point with my mom and dad, and they actually went with me to drop me off at the academy. But I had to leave my two younger brothers there at home. Back, we were living in California at the time, in Los Angeles, and that was a little bit tough, especially my youngest brother Joe, because. I was 7 years older, so I was 17, he was 10. So he was pretty upset when I left him, so that was kind of tough. And then when they drop you off at West Point, there's a big auditorium that you go into with your parents, and you're all sitting there, and then a colonel comes up and he starts talking to you about how proud you should be about accomplishing, just even getting into West Point is a big accomplishment. And, starting your career in the Army, that's a big accomplishment. And you've come a long way, and there's a long way to go, but you should be proud of what you've achieved. And it's very, very friendly. And then he leaves the center stage there, and then a cadet comes up and he says, "Okay, would like everybody to go ahead and stand up. I'd like the cadets to go ahead, the new cadets, they don't call you cadets at that point, the new cadets to go ahead and exit at the top of the stairs. Parents, if you would please move to the doors here at the bottom of the stairs. You have 1 minute to say your goodbyes." And that's really when it hits you that this is happening. So yeah, that was pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. So do you recall? So at West Point, you go to cadet basic training.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall what that experience was like?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed cadet basic training. I thought it was great. You're outside most of the time, for a lot of the time. You're learning the same stuff that privates learn when they go to their basic training. And then there's some other things that they teach you that are specific to the academy. The first day is definitely different than any other experience, I think, throughout the Army, even regular basic training, because what happens during that first day, they call it R Day, which means reception day, is they basically take somebody who is a civilian right off the street with no military training. They get him sized up for a uniform. They train him how to march. They train him how to do basic drill and ceremony. They put you in a uniform, and at the end of the day, you're marching in the R Day parade, and that's a really proud moment. But it's a really tough getting there because you have no idea what you're doing. I remember one day, or one moment on that first day was I was standing. I'd been told to go up into my room and drink 4 glasses of water and come right back downstairs. So I got up to my room and I was drinking 4 glasses of water, looking at myself in the mirror. I had hair, kind of like what you've got right now, only a little bit longer even. And hair was completely shaved off. I'd been out in the sun, so I was, kind of sunburned. I remember drinking these glasses of water, looking at myself in the mirror, thinking, my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Yeah, it was something else.
So, what was, while you were at West Point, actually before that, while you were still at Davis training and at West Point, what was it like transitioning from being a skater kid to being a cadet?
Yeah, it was different. So I think, so the interesting thing for me was the fact that just coming together with a bunch of other kids my age from all over the United States. So, we had some of us from out west, from California, a bunch of people from the Northeast, a bunch of people from the South, a bunch of people from the Midwest, all kind of thrown together to try to learning about each other, some of us for the first time. His dad was in the Air Force, I moved around quite a bit and seen different parts of the country, but a lot of people hadn't. And so it was interesting learning about other folks. And that also was part of the transition into the military, which is, your background matters a little bit, but what most matters is the effort that you're going to put forward every day. And that was something that was different for me because, in high school I was always, I was pretty good, pretty close to top of my class. I was in scouts like you, was an Eagle Scout, and was doing these things that made me feel very, very proud. But when you get to West Point, everybody's done all that. Everybody's got all that stuff to talk. Everyone's an Eagle Scout at West Point, so they're maybe not everybody, but a lot of them are. And so what you got to realize then is that you're special, but just like everybody else is. And so you've got to put your ego aside and embrace some humility and start to learn from these other people who are there with you, coming from different parts of the country with different experiences, to learn from the more senior cadets that are there with you, to understand what they've learned, because they know the way. And the great thing, similar to Scouts, where it's all boy-led, at West Point, it's all cadet-led. It's a cadet chain of command. And there's, of course, officers that oversee things, but the cadets run that academy. And so yeah, that was a big transition. There was a lot of things and practical skills that you learn, like how to make your bed tightly, how to shine your shoes, how to make sure your uniforms are pressed appropriately. You learn how to shoot a weapon. You learn how to throw a hand grenade. You learn fieldcraft and how to survive in an austere environment. And all of those things, I think, they're tough, but I like those things. I think for me, the most difficult piece was really just taking it one day at a time, and just keeping your head to the grindstone, just saying, okay, all I got to do today is just make it through today, and then the next day, just make it through that next day, and then even within the day, it's like I just got to make it. Got to make it to breakfast. Okay, I made it to breakfast. Now I just got to make it to lunch. And in between there, it's just like I just put one foot in front of the other foot and just keep going and just never quit. Yeah.
So after cadet basic training and you're a full real cadet. How rigorous was your academic schedule for West Point?
Yeah, it was pretty rigorous. So West Point, in its heart and soul, is an engineering school. So it's whether or not you choose to major in engineering, everybody's going to have an engineering track, an engineering minor. And you even start to see that engineering mindset come through even in your very first year when you're a plebe. And there are core classes that you have to take, of course, just like any college, but there's a big emphasis on math. There's a big emphasis on science and technology and engineering, and in fact, there's this class, and it was called Discrete Dynamic Systems, and it's the first math class that you take at West Point as a plebe, and it's like fake math. It's like no math that you've ever learned before in your entire life, but and so you just have to learn it like this. It's like new math that you've never learned before that you have to go and you have to learn, and it was really, really challenging. But the great thing about West Point, about the Army, is if you're putting forth the effort, they're going to make sure you succeed. And so there's the professors there were very, very helpful. The upper class cadets, every cadet company has its own study room, and you've got just all of the all of the tests that have ever been taken at West Point or somewhere in that study room. And so, you can go back and you look at those tests and start to feel what's going on. And of course, you got a company of cadets that are around you, and so there's always going to be somebody who's smarter than somebody else. And so it's all about helping each other out. And so maybe you're good at one particular subject, but not so good at another. And so just about helping folks out and building that teamwork. But as long as like I said earlier, just one thing after the other, just do the work and don't quit, and you'll succeed.
So, in your time in the military, what kind of specialized schools have you attended? Yeah,
I've been to quite a few. So, after West Point, I went to the, at the time it was called the Armor Officer Basic Course. So it was it's tanks. I think now they call it BOLIC, Basic Officer Leader Course. But I learned how to be a tank commander and command a platoon of tanks. And then following that, I went to, while I was at West Point, I got the opportunity to go to airborne school, learn how to jump out of airplanes, which is always fun. You get to learn how to jump out of a perfectly good airplane in 3 weeks, in fact. So it's a lot of fun. So I've done that, and then I've done Armor Officer Basic Course. After that, I went to Ranger School, of course, and started Ranger School on January 1st, 1997. I was a winter ranger. It was very, very cold while I was there. Was there for 3 months. I recycled the first phase because I wasn't able to navigate the land nav course on time. So myself and my ranger buddy, both of us recycled. And then after that, we went straight through. So we made it through Darby, and then we made it through Mountains phase, and then through Swamp phase. Of course, Ranger School. And then I also went, when I got to my unit, I was a tank platoon leader, and then I became a scout platoon leader. And so they sent me to something called SPLC, which is Scout Platoon Leader Course. And so I learned how to be a scout platoon leader, which is all about reconnaissance and how to move around, forward of friendly lines and sort of sneak around and figure out where the bad guys are, so you can report that up. Learn that, and then I went to the Armor Officer Advanced course, and then which is learning more about how to be a company commander. And then they had this thing called CASQ, which was Command and Staff Service School, which is learning how to be a staff officer. So did those things. Then I went to Command General Staff College, and then Advanced Operations course, and now I'm in the Army War College. So at different levels of seniority within the Army, you actually go through and you get the appropriate level of education. So I'm at the more senior level, so I'm going through this senior level education, which is more about strategic studies, and it's actually interesting. It's kind of this blend between strategy and politics, so very, very interesting.
So upon graduating West Point, actually a little bit before, when you were active duty, you were armor. What made you choose armor over?
Yeah, well, so at a couple of things. So one, they've got, while you're there at West Point, all of the different service branches kind of showcase what they're all about. And so they've got this thing called branch days, and you go in, and you talk to officers from different branches, and you kind of figure out what you're looking for. I always knew I wanted to be combat armed. So either it was going to be infantry, or it was going to be armor, or it was going to be aviation, or field artillery. I always wanted to do something that was, was combat arms and combat focused. And then, I don't know, like I got on a tank, and I got to, when I was actually the summer of my sophomore year, your yearling year, at, you go to this place called Camp Buckner, and then one of the trips they take you to, you actually go to Fort Knox, which is where the armor school is. And so I went there and actually got on a tank and was able to, got to shoot a tank. And at that point, I was like, wow, this is great. So I thought that was pretty cool. Plus, like the armor branch draws its history and its heritage back to the old horse cavalry. And I always thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, it was exciting to choose armor, and really loved it. Best job in the Army. Two best jobs in the Army. One tank platoon leader, and the second was a scout platoon leader. And just something about rolling out to the field with 4 tanks and knowing that those are all yours, and you can get out there and get after it. So it was a lot of fun.
So after West Point, you went to your armor basic officer leadership course, then you went to Ranger school. What made you want to go to Ranger school? What
I don't know. I always thought. For one, I thought it was cool. So, and, mostly. But also just it's something that not a lot of officers in the Army have, and it's a challenge. And I wanted to challenge myself. I've always wanted to try to do the very best at whatever I've done. That's why I wanted to be an Eagle Scout, because it's a challenge, and it's something that you've got to work at, and you've got to have other people help you with it. And I thought that was something that I really wanted to do. But yeah, there was, and then just there's a lot of proud history behind the Rangers, and so I wanted to do that. But mostly, I also wanted to come to my first unit with that Ranger tab, because it would give it, and it did. It gave me confidence that I was going to be able to lead my platoon effectively. Also, I think it also gave my platoon some confidence in me, because they saw, here's a brand new second lieutenant, but at least he's gone through something that's really, really tough, and he's made it through. And he's a Ranger, and he's gonna be able to lead us. And so, those are a couple of the reasons why.
So after graduating or finishing Bullock and Ranger school, you went active duty. What was your unit that you arrived to? So
I was in 1st Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, and the battalion was 1-34 Armor. It was an armor battalion, and it was at Fort Riley in Kansas, and I got there 97, middle of 97, spring of 97 probably, spring of 97, went right into a tank platoon leader slot. Was a tank platoon leader for 3rd Platoon Bravo Company, 134 Armor. Bounty Hunter 3-1 was my call sign, because we were bounty hunters. So I was a Bounty Hunter 3-1.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was a cool unit. That was a really cool unit. Now, I still remember my first platoon sergeant, who taught me a ton about leadership and a ton about how to be a good platoon leader. His name was became a first sergeant at the time. He was Sergeant First Class Edler, and we made a great pair, because he was I bet you, I'm not very dumb, 5'1". He was probably 6'10", and at the time I just gotten back from Ranger school, so I was really skinny, because they don't feed you a lot there at Ranger school, so I maybe weighed like $125. So I'm 5'1", $125, platoon leader, and the platoon sergeant's pushing 7 feet, every bit of 290 pounds, just like built like a bodybuilder. And we made quite a pair, but learned a lot from him, what a great leader.
So you were a tank platoon leader for a while, and then you moved and became a cavalry scout platoon leader?
So almost. So I was a cav or tank platoon leader, and then they moved me to be this is like the most thankless job in a tank battalion, which is to be the support platoon leader. So I was in charge of something called the support platoon, which had about 150 guys in it, and it was a platoon with 150 guys, with 70 trucks, and we were responsible for movement of ammunition, fuel, and food for the entire battalion. So it's a big logistics kind of nightmare. And so you got to get out there, you got to get after it, and it's really tough. But I did that for about 18 months, and then after that, they made me the scout platoon leader, which I just thought was awesome. So scout platoon, 10 reconnaissance Humvees, 30 guys, 3 dudes per Humvee, and that was awesome. That was great. We had a blast. I had my platoon sergeant there. guy named Frank Balonis, Sergeant First Class Frank Balonis.
Mm.
Really good guy, also fantastic leader. Learned a lot from him, and he made me, he really exemplified for me what a great NCO can be, and how a great NCO can really make a great officer.
Mm-hmm. So you were what did you do? You went on a deployment to Korea.
That's right, yeah. So after, so I got promoted to captain, left the scout platoon, and then right after I got promoted, then I went to the Armor Officer Advanced course. Mm-hmm. So I was there for a little bit, and then went to CAS Cubed at Fort Leavenworth, and then I got orders for Korea. It was back in 2000, 2001, and then I was over in Korea. I was there in Korea for 9/11.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what was going on when 9/11 happened? What was your reaction?
Yeah, so the job that I had over in Korea was I was working directly with Republic of Korean Army headquarters, and so I would go to work every day. We lived on a U.S. compound, but where we would go to work was a Republic of Korea Army compound called it was First Republic of Korea Army, FROCA. And so what ended up happening was I was, it was the middle of the night over there, so we're 12 hours opposite of what's going on. So I was in my room, and I actually got a call from our staff duty officer, and he said, "Hey, grab your stuff. We're heading to the bunker." And I thought it was a drill. I thought it was just a drill, but they put the whole Korean Peninsula on alert. We went to our wartime headquarters, which was it was a bunker that was dug. It was like say it's a bunker. It was like an office building that was built underground. And so we all moved there, and we stayed there for about a week, trying to figure out a lot of confusion at that time, but a lot of the folks that we worked with were certain that we were going to go to war almost immediately.
So, how long were you on active duty before?
So I was on active duty for a total a little over 6 years. Yeah, last assignment was in Korea. You were born while I was over there in Korea. I came back just to see you born, and then turn around and leave. Yeah.
And so after getting our active duty, did you immediately go to the National Guard? Or?
I did, and there was about a year or so where I was working for Procter & Gamble at the time in Cincinnati, and about a year or so that I wasn't doing any National Guard stuff. But there was an armor battalion there in Cincinnati, so I missed it. I really missed the camaraderie and working with guys, and so it was a great opportunity.
You joined the Ohio National Guard?
I did, yep. Joined the Ohio National Guard, and was with them not very long, about a year. And then, probably less than that even. And then Procter & Gamble moved me down here to Arkansas, and I did an interstate transfer and got moved into the headquarters for the 142nd Field Artillery as a captain, yeah.
When you moved to this unit, what was your position?
I was, I really don't remember. I'm sure I was helping out on the brigade staff. I was probably like the assistant to the assistant operations officer or something like that. But I did a lot of staff planning because I had been to the advanced course, had been to CAS Cubed. I knew how to do MDMP, was really good at MDMP's military decision-making process. It's a staff process we use. So I was helping out with that, and was here in the brigade. Let's see, it was about a year or so, maybe two. Came up time for me to get promoted to major, and I hadn't, I was still an armor officer at the time, so I had to actually go back to school and go to the field artillery advanced course, which I did, and became a field artillery officer. And then got promoted to major, went to Little Rock for a year, worked on the state staff there, and then came back to the brigade as I think I was the information operations officer or something like that, yeah.
So when you arrived to the unit, the 142nd.
Mhm.
Not long. You went to Katrina with the brigade.
I did, yeah, as a captain, that's right, I was a captain.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow. That was, yeah, I went to Katrina with the brigade. So, right, so the way that worked was states have agreements with their neighboring states that if something happens, that those neighboring states are going to be some of the first to respond. It just makes sense, they're close, and they're neighbors, right? So we had a relationship with, the state of Arkansas had a relationship with Louisiana, obviously, because they're directly to our south, that if, they needed our assistance in some sort of, and we knew it was going to be some sort of hurricane-related disaster, that we would be one of the first folks to, first states to respond, and of course we did. Within 24 hours of Katrina making landfall, we had already activated our emergency action list, and we're notifying guys, bringing them on orders, and getting ready to send them down to Katrina. So yeah, I rolled down to Katrina. So there was a major who was in charge. I was a captain. There was another captain that was with us, and the three of us led a convoy of about a little over 70 vehicles with food and clean water and fuel, a bunch of electrical generation equipment, a bunch of boats, so we could go recover people out of water. And immediately, we drove down. It took us 2 days to get down there because everything was so congested and confused, evacuating. Got down there, got to Belle Chase was the name of the Naval Air Station that we went to, and immediately started to run operations out of there. And it was mostly, at that point, we were using the vehicles that we had, which had a pretty deep fording depth, to drive around some of these neighborhoods and pull guys out of their houses, because there were still people that were stranded in their houses. And so we were pulling people out of houses. And then as the waters kind of started to recede, they actually pushed us out into the communities, and we started to set up these food, water, and ice distribution centers. And so we were providing initially, kind of some rescue operations, and then after the rescue, we were providing, and first aid, then we were providing more of just, just basic needs. So we're pushing water, we're pushing ice, making sure we're checking on folks that maybe were a little bit older that we needed to go look in on, things like that, to make sure that they were okay. We also had to handle a little bit of looting, so we had to do some security around different areas to make sure that was taken care of. And then we did these things called presence patrols, where in particular areas where the gangs were starting to come back in and start to do some of the looting, we would have our vehicles, and we'd just, kind of drive around, and that tended to keep the bad actors away.
So after Katrina, you deployed to Iraq with the brigade?
Yeah, it was a little ways after. I think Katrina was like 2005, I think, somewhere in there. And then we deployed to Iraq in 2007. I went over there as I was something called Information Operations Officer, Engagements Officer. But so the brigade headquarters deployed. The brigade deployed initially to Camp Spiker, which is in Discrete, in kind of the middle northern part of Iraq. But then I actually got detached from the brigade and was assigned to a place in Mosul called Camp or Fob Merez. And it was actually interesting because Fob Merez is where my youngest brother, Joseph, your Uncle Joseph, he was stationed over there in 2004 when he was on active duty. But yeah, so I was there in Fob Merez, and my job there in Fob Merez, I worked directly with a one-star general, and I was responsible for helping him develop and foster relationships with senior Army leaders in the Army of Iraq, and so in Iraq's Army, in the government of Iraq, local civic leaders, local business leaders, to try to stabilize things. And so creating these senior level engagements to try to mayors and things like that, to try to set conditions for the actual government of Iraq, the people of Iraq, to take over those different provinces. Because initially, when we had we moved over there, we were administering that country ourselves, and so we had to basically set the conditions so that those provinces and the central government could take over and manage for themselves, and not just from a rule of law perspective, and not just from a government perspective, but obviously from a security perspective, from a like simple stuff like collecting the trash and getting the electricity to work, and so all of those different things we work with them on.
So when you were in Iraq, who did you work for, like the team you were on?
Yeah, so I worked for there was so the first division that I was over there with was the 25th Infantry Division. And then they rotated out, and then the first Armored Division took over. And so in both instances, I was working with a one-star general who was a deputy division commander. For the 25th, it was Brigadier General Rosinski, who later retired as a three-star general and commanded, I think he commanded PACOM, might have been a four-star general. But really just an outstanding officer, learned a lot from him. And he placed a lot of faith in me to help him develop these relationships. And then the next division that I worked for was the 1st Armored Division, and that was at the time it was I started out as a colonel and then got promoted to one-star general, and it was at the time Brigadier General Tony Thomas. And so as you know, General Thomas is now a 4-star general in Command Special Operations Command. But just another outstanding officer, very, very fortunate to work for him. Learned a lot about how to develop relationships with organizations and with individuals that come from a different background than what you come from. And what it really comes down to is just a lot of listening and seeking to understand and putting your own preconceived notions aside and really focusing on trying to understand where these people are coming from. And it's difficult because there's a cultural barrier that obviously exists between the way that we're all brought up in a Western society and what we see over there in the Middle East. So,
what were when you were in Iraq, what was the general populace's attitude toward American troops?
I think it varied. So there was obviously there were some insurgents, bad actors out of this, clearly wanted us out. The Shia special groups were being, I think, driven primarily by the Iranians, and this is all well documented. So, that they were there to cause problems, and so they were actively agitating and creating violence. There were also, disgruntled, former Iraqi army officials that were, now out of power, so they weren't happy about the fact that we had basically just defeated their army. But then there also, at the same time, there were a lot of allies that we had there. So the Kurdish population in the northern part of Iraq and the provinces of Dahuk, Erbil, and Sulaymaniyah, as an example, were fantastic allies. They had the most stable part of Iraq, and even though they are ethnically different than the Arabs, they still played a critical role in helping to govern not just their provinces, but also represent and drive a total Iraq government. So, but they were fantastic allies. Some of the toughest warriors you'll ever see. They've got their army is called the Peshmerga, and these guys are just hard as nails warriors, and count on them for anything. And they're fantastic allies to us. They've been our allies for a long, long time, and it's my hope they'll continue to be, because they're just amazingly proficient warriors, and just, like I said, just tough as nails.
What are some memories you have of your deployment to Iraq?
I got a lot of different memories of the deployment to Iraq. So the first memory that I'll share with you is the first day. So the first day that I got up to Fayetteville, Wright. So I flew by helicopter, Black Hawk, from Camp Spiker into Discrete. It's about an hour and a half, 2-hour flight by helicopter up to Fayetteville, and landed there, and get off the helicopter, get moved into my like we call them CHU, combat housing units, or like trailers we lived in, and I was very excited about everything that was going on there, and then all of a sudden, like we call it the big voice, and it was warning us of an incoming rocket attack, and that very first night, and for the it wasn't anything special about me being there. It was just like that happened every night and every day for the first couple of months that we were there. That thing would go off, and we would all run into we call it the bunker, but it was basically this really big cement tube that we would all get inside, and really just it's meant to protect you more from shrapnel than anything, because if there was a direct hit with one of those missiles, it would have or rockets, it would have blown up. But yeah, that was my first memory. That was incredibly scary. Second memory that I had that really made an impact on me is that we were out on a mission one day, and cause we got out, we myself and a small group of us flying around with the general, doing these different engagements. We left pretty much. I bet you, 5 out of 7 days we were flying off, doing somewhere, driving off somewhere, doing a kind of meeting, doing an engagement. So we had come back from one of those missions, and what had happened was there rockets, while we were gone, had actually hit the compound where our housing units were. And so that was kind of freaky. There's still some shrapnel that I've got picked out of the. I mean, a couple of those things was blown up, and if we had been there that day, we'd have been goners. The third thing was this was pretty early when I was there. We had landed the helicopters, and we had finished up. We landed the helicopters on an airfield. We'd finished up the engagement that we had gone to do. We were meeting with U.S. Senior leaders at the time, and so most of us had gotten back on helicopters. We're just waiting for the general, and of course, he's general, so he can take as much time as he wants, and because he's busy and he's got a lot of work to do. So I remember we were sitting on the airfield, and I had my headphones in, and I was listening to some music, and I remember hearing this. It sounded like a jet, but it was really, really low, and I was like, man, that jet is way too low. There's no way that guy's going to be able to land this thing. He's going to have to pull that off. And then what happened was it was a medic shack that was right next to where the helicopters were, just blew up, and it was a missile or a rocket that was coming in. It blew up, and so me and everybody else in the helicopters, got off, and we ran over there, and we're pulling guys out and trying to help as many as we could. But it was what was odd, I remember thinking, I was like, man, we got to get some stretchers out here to get these guys out. And there was a stack of stretchers, and I thought to myself, oh, that's really, really fortunate. There's a stack of stretchers right there. And then that's when it hit me that the reason there's a stack of stretchers there is because that was the medic shack that just got blown up. And so, like, the guys that we would have been calling to help with these wounded were actually the ones that were themselves wounded. And so, of course, we did our best with our first aid we can, got them out of there and got them evac'd. But yeah, that was a pretty surreal day.
What kind of, I imagine you said 5 days a week you were out doing stuff. How often would y'all encounter, like, enemies shooting at?
Yeah, most of the stuff that we encountered was either indirect fire with rockets. There was a couple of times where like really sporadic small arms fire, but nothing really serious. And then IEDs were the big thing. Like we would either observe IEDs or like I was in a convoy and vehicle in front of us got blown up by IEDs. You could tell like when there was something that happened because like the street would just get really we'd be on like a busy street, you turn a corner, there'd be no one there. Like, all right, something's about to happen. And without fail, something happened. Either we would see the IED or the IED, in this case, like it actually blew up. But yeah, most of the time, because we were traveling by air, we didn't have that problem. We did get, when you travel by air, you have to fly over these palm groves from when you're coming into Baghdad. So we're flying from Mosul or from Speicher into Baghdad, and man, those pilots, they start yanking and banking around those palm groves because that's where they traditionally would get a lot of the small arms and rocket fire. And the Black Hawk has a system on it that when it detects a heat plume from like a rocket being fired, it'll automatically start popping off these flares. And that was pretty startling the first time that I saw that happening. I was moving around, and all of a sudden the flares start coming out the side of the helicopter, and the pilot immediately starts banking the other way. And fortunately, we never got so never got hit by a rocket, but. I mean, there's no way a helicopter would survive that. But yeah, a lot of small arms from that. But yeah, for the most part, it was IEDs and then indirect fire with rockets being shot at somewhere on the fob.
So whenever you mentioned IEDs and rockets and stuff, it must be really hard losing soldiers that were on your security detail. And
yeah, unfortunately, we didn't lose anybody on our security detail, but. I mean, there was, because I worked with this general, we would go to almost every memorial ceremony that we could to represent the division. So we were going to those quite a bit, and those are just awful. It's just, it's incredibly tragic. So just the bravery of some of these soldiers when you hear the stories. It's just. It's really heart-wrenching. So young, God, so young.
While you were deployed, what kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form?
Yeah, well, I mean, seeing two of my best friends, Colonel Gibbons and General Bacon you see them at the house all the time. Yeah, they're some of my very best friends. And I was deployed with both those guys. And we've been, friends for a long time. We were friends before that, but we're even better friends now. And I think there's a special bond that comes from serving with folks in combat. But I think it's even more special in the Guard. And the reason for that is because we're a family. I mean, I've known David since 2004. I mean, it's 15 years since. And same thing with General Bacon. Like I've known those guys for long time. And so you build this, you've got shared experiences and you're part of the same unit. I mean, it's not that way on active duty because, certainly, guys come in and you become quick friends like that. But 2 years, you're rotating off to go somewhere else.
Right.
3 years, you're going to be in a different unit. That's not like this. We're here. Like, this is I tell everybody this all the time. I mean, this brigade, like, literally is a family. I mean, it's, it's like us, fathers and sons and brothers and sisters and mothers. I mean, all of us are part of this. And so I think that's something that's really special, and that's something that is different about the Guard that you don't see in the active duty. At least I didn't see. And it's really something very cool. And then when you do deploy with guys like this, the relationship's already there. Like you've got 10 years of relationship and trust built up in these people. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Guard units are so effective. I mean, you can see here at 2nd Battalion, this battalion will show up on Friday and roll out to the field on a Saturday and go ahead and shoot 100, 200 rounds, and then turn around, come back in on a Sunday. There's no way. That could never happen on active duty. It would just impossible. It would be take them a week to get out of the motor pool, and then once they got out of the motor pool, then they mess around, and try to occupy for 2 or 3 days, and then maybe after that they start shooting, and then they come back. We can do it in 3 days. And it's because we got these relationships built. But those relationships are even stronger when you deploy with these guys, and so now you've got even more shared experience to draw back on.
While you were deployed in Iraq, how did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Well, we were, we got technology, right? So a lot of email, and I would do video chat from time to time. So it's actually very connected. It was a very developed theater, so that wasn't too big of an issue. I tried. I tried to touch base every now and then, but the thing is, for me at least, I felt like staying focused kind of helped. That's why I decided not to come back on a mid-tour leave. I just decided to go all the way through.
Yeah. What did you do for recreation when you were when you had?
We worked out a lot. We'd go. There was not really a gym, but there was a bunch of weights, and so I came back from Iraq and I was probably in the best shape of my life. Lifted a lot.
How did you return home from Iraq?
So that was actually kind of cool. So you kind of just retrace your steps. So I went from Merez to Spiker to Kuwait. From Kuwait we flew to Ireland. Ireland we flew to, I think it was Baltimore. And the thing that I remember most when we were flying into Baltimore was just how green everything was. Because it's so dark and brown over in Iraq. Man, it was just so green. I remember just looking at a modern city that's developed and all this green, just thinking God, and felt so good to be home, kind of thing.
How were you received by family and community when you came home? Yeah,
it was great, right? I mean, so you were there when I got off the bus at the Armory, and commander said a couple of words, and it was awesome. That was one of the one of the best days. That was fantastic. It was great to see you again. With your long hair, you had long hair. And a hat. You were there with Grandpa. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Yep. And they wrote a newspaper article about us.
Yeah, I remember that. How did you readjust to civilian life coming home?
Yeah, that is pretty difficult. The biggest difference between civilian life here and when guys are deployed, at least for me, was that when you're in a situation like that, you're afraid all of the time, to the point where you become used to it, and your body actually has a physiological response to it, and it starts pumping out a lot of adrenaline, and your heart muscles are starting to really contract. Your body is on edge 24/7, and what happens when you come back, you realize that you don't have to be afraid anymore, and your body realizes that too, so it stops producing all of that adrenaline. And so there's a physiological withdrawal that you actually go through when you do that. So that, in some people, that causes depression, and some people, like me, you go out and you buy a really fast Mustang Celine and try to get back at it when say workout, things like that. But it's just different for different people.
And have you managed to stay in contact with your Army buddies from the deployment? And some of them you still.
Well, most of them are in the brigade, so yeah, absolutely. A lot of folks, not able to, that were in either 1st or 25th. I wasn't able to talk with those guys, but for the most part, we still stay in touch. So. Because they're here in the Brigade, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So,
That's what how have your wartime experiences affected your day-to-day life?
yeah, I think for me, I'm just more and more grateful for just the things that sometimes you take for granted. Just the fact that, we all can, feel pretty secure about just driving down the highway. We can feel pretty secure about, maybe even going to a town we've never been in before and know that it's going to be all right. We can feel pretty secure in the fact that, if there's in the rule of law, that there's a police organization out there taking care of us, and that when we turn the light switch on, the lights are going to come on. There are a lot of places in the world where that is not at all the case. And I think for me, I've really started to appreciate and to be more grateful for the things that we do have. And then, every now and then start to get frustrated about different things, and you take a step back and really think through. It's like, wow, we've got so much to be thankful over here that we live in this great country that is able to provide this kind of security for us, able to provide this kind of opportunity for us, and create an environment where people, if they try their best, can thrive and grow and be rewarded. So,
what are some life lessons that you've learned from the years of your military service?
Life lessons. I think that the first thing is just never quit. So first thing is never quit. The second thing is anything can be done. Like it frustrates me when people say, "Well, we can't do that." Of course we can. Of course we can. Will it be hard? Yes, but of course we can. What I've told folks is that we can't do that. It's like, no, we can't do that yet. As long as you add the word "yet," then it opens your mind. There are things that I've done in my time in the military that if I look back at it, I'm like, wow, there's no way that I could have done that. But of course you can. Anything can be done. Anything is possible if you put your mind to it, if you work hard, and if you just break it down into just taking one step at a time, one day at a time, then there's nothing you can't accomplish. And you don't have to be that smart. You don't have to be that smart. You just have to be dedicated. And just never, ever, ever quit. I think that for me, look at me, man. I'm 5'1". I lead a brigade of field artillery. I'm a colonel. I'm a ranger. You can do anything. There's nothing that cannot be done. So if somebody tells you that you can't do it, it's a lie. Anything can be accomplished.
How has military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general? So,
look, nobody hates war more than a soldier, because the soldier's the person that's going to have to put the most on the line in the case of war. So nobody hates war more than me. But I think the best way to prevent war is to prepare for it, is to make sure that each and every day that I spend here in the National Guard, I'm doing my level best to make sure that this unit is ready to go and is ready to not just fight, but fight and win in a highly lethal, very austere environment. And so I hate war, but I think the best way to prepare for it, or the best way to prevent it, is to prepare for it.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will watch this interview?
This is what I would say, and I kind of already mentioned this, but you can do anything. There is no upward bound on what you can accomplish if you just take it one step at a time and just take the next step and then the next step and the next step and never quit. You can accomplish anything. That's what I would say.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed that should be added?
No, man, I think this is good.